Good morning. Blimey, I am a bit whited out there, aren't I? Good morning, everybody. Darren Lovesley here from Second Sight, hosting today's Financial Fitness Friday. It's number 3 in the winter series. A bit of a different one today, which I'm really looking forward to. I really enjoyed the preparation on this one, working with Emily here, which I'll introduce in a moment. Today's topic is about how to reduce levels of financial stress and anxiety. And I really am into the fact that, financial well-being and emotional well-being are kind of inextricably linked. And hopefully we're going to see some of that today. So just a bit of housekeeping for everybody. The session formally finishes in half an hour. So there'll be a half an hour, we'll do a stop there at the end at that point. But we will be open to questions. I'm sure Emily's happy to stay on for 10 minutes afterwards. This is how we usually do it. For those who want to hang around, ask some questions. And I've got a feeling there's going to be quite a few today for you, Emily. So all good news. And so then we'll go for about another 10, 15 minutes. And when the questions dry up, we'll end it then. If there's any questions that are a bit personal, we'll pick them up individually. If it's questions that we can answer and they're going to be beneficial to the whole group, that's absolutely brilliant. So there's a few more people just jumping on at the moment. What people tend to do, to really get going about 2 minutes past these things. So just in terms of financial well-being as a theme for this, obviously Emily's an expert in her field, and I'll explain a bit more about her in a moment. But I come from a financial well-being perspective, and I really do appreciate and understand that a big part of financial well-being is psychology. In fact, I would say about 80% of financial well-being is the mindset. It's in our head. It's how we feel about our money. It's our relationship with money. It's our habits and our behaviors. Whereas a lot of people think it's all about just being rich or having lots of cash and that sort of thing. It's definitely not. And we're going to talk about financial stress and anxiety today. And I'm very much aware of where that is driven from when it comes to finances. And it comes from feeling out of control. When we feel out of control, we feel stressed. Simple as that. When we feel in control of most things, the stress goes down. But it's not something we can just do once. It's something we have to work on all the time. Things keep on changing. And so in order to feel in control of our finances, there's two things we need to do. One is our habits, okay? And the second thing is our knowledge. But it's the right knowledge, not just knowing everything about money, it's knowing everything you need to know about money for your situation. So that's the key thing. And habits, how do we get new habits? How do we get positive habits? Well, we need to find that motivation. We need to find our own why we want to do things. And once we've discovered our why, we change our behavior. Once we've changed our behavior for a while and we start to improve things, we need to attribute the positivity of the progress of the behavior to the habit. And then that habit is then formed, and our decisions going forward are made in advance. It's a great way to live. Temptation, we can push it away because we've got good habits. It's a habitual way of thinking as well as a habitual way of being. So that's from the financial side, but I want to explore this other element as well and see how the two pull together. So Emily from Thrive, Emily Cooke, welcome Emily. Really grateful to have you here with us today. Now, as I've always said, this is not a plug or a sales pitch or promotion for any product or service for anyone, okay? Emily works for Thrive. She would not be promoting Thrive, even though I've mentioned it a few times. This is good exposure for Second Sight, Fosters and Over, and Thrive, absolutely. But we're not selling anything at the end. So if you are an employer and you're looking at this for your employees, you can put them on safely. If you're an employee and you're having a look at some of this stuff, you can just sit back and relax and know you're not going to be sold to. That's what the whole point of today's all about. When I met Emily, I thought to myself, well, Emily looks very young. What are her credentials, So I wanted to find out, and she's got plenty of them. So I've got it written down because I couldn't remember them all. Emily is a business psychologist with a degree in psychology and a master's in organizational psychology and psychiatry. In her role at Thrive, Emily works with the business to develop their approach to employee well-being using core psychological principles and mental health expertise. So there is a bit more to the introduction, but I think Emily can share that with us herself. So welcome, Emily. Thanks so much for jumping on today. Very nice to see you. I think the sun's shining out there. Things starting to lift a little bit out there. What do you think?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, to be fair though, I'm in an alcove, which is grey, so it's probably not the best place to be, but I can see the sun shining through the window behind me. So yeah, I'm really, really, really pleased to be here. And that was a lot of words. I realised when I was writing that introduction that is a lot of words, and what does it actually mean? So in short, I guess my kind of area of expertise and interest is mental health in the workplace. behaviour in the workplace. So that's it in short, really.
Brilliant. And you can see there's plenty of sun about. Look how much it's reflected off my face. I had complaints last week about the sun on my face, so not a lot I can do about it at the moment. I am going to build a studio, okay, so we're going to proper controlled lighting. Okay, so just before we get into the meat of it, Emily, just a little bit more. We've discovered some of your background, but what was it that brought you to where you are today? You've got your credentials from, academically, but then there was obviously a bit of a journey. Just tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
So after I did my my undergraduate, to be honest with you, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to work with people, and I was just trying to figure out what that would look like. So I moved over to Australia to live the dream, and I ended up starting out in recruitment. So it was a really good foot in the door, and it was such a good eye opener into working life. And that's, I guess, where my kind of interest in this area developed, because I was spending every single day talking to people who wanted to leave their jobs, and they were unhappy. They didn't have supportive line management. They weren't properly compensated. They weren't engaged in their work. They weren't progressing enough. And it just struck me that there was a real disconnect between what I was hearing from people that were looking to leave and from the companies that were losing these people. Because often I would then backfill their roles, and I'd speak to their manager and try and get their understanding as to, why they left and what they're looking for in new people. And there just was this gap and a disconnect, and it just kind of sparked this interest in me to really try and work in a role where I can support organizations to make the most of their people, because I think that it's an opportunity missed by a lot. So I came back to the UK to study my master's, and finished that and joined Thrive, and here I am. So it was a good journey, and I think I'm definitely in the right position.
Well, you're lucky, because I spent probably about 28 years getting to this position. It's the best place I've ever been, because it's a really good combo of finance and psychology, which are my two passions, especially the psychology side of things. You seem to have got there in just a few years, so good for you. I mean, it feels like you're not going to work when you're just doing what you love every day.
Yeah, there's still, I've still got places to be. I'm one of those people that's never quite satisfied. There's always something else that I want to do and that I want to be doing. So, but I'm happy. I'm in a good position.
Brilliant, good for you. Just for the audience out there, if you use the Q&A, stick your questions on as we go through, and then what I'll do, we'll pick those up at the end. So, Emily, so current situation, we've got COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, I'm sick of hearing about it, but it's there, it's real, it's happened. So just, in context of, right now, what are the most common causes of stress and anxiety that you're seeing right now, especially due to the pandemic?
I think it's quite widespread at the beginning of the pandemic, and even, up until a few weeks ago, and probably still now, a lot of it is around uncertainty about the future, what that's going to look like. As humans, we're hardwired to perceive uncertainty as a risk. We don't like not knowing what's going to happen, and there's that element of control around it, which we'll talk about a bit later. But through our conversations with people, it was a lot around uncertainty. There's also a lot of insecurity. Sorry, the postman.
Do you get that?
There's a lot of insecurity for people as well. We've seen, unfortunately, people are losing their jobs, and there's a lot of uncertainty around what the effects of the pandemic will be on our economy. So financial and job security is a big point there. There's also a lot of isolation and loneliness, with people shielding, not being able to see people, being at home by themselves, or that's been a significant stressor for a lot of people. Health as well, but I think now, certainly what I've noticed is I'm getting the sense that people are less stressed at the moment and more just exhausted. right? So, you know, it's taken a significant amount of mental resources to cope with this situation. This is something we've never had to deal with before. So we're hearing about kind of what's normal and how can we act normal in an abnormal situation. So I think that, you know, that it's been really taxing for people, and there's a lot of burnout. I've felt it myself at times. So I think that there's a lot of things that are contributing to people's stress and anxiety, and it really is kind of down to individual situations. But those are kind of the main themes that we've been seeing.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by the parallels you get between the work you do and the work that I do. I mean, you talked about uncertainty, and people don't like not knowing. And this, you know, when you apply that literally to finance, it's exactly the same thing. You know, when people don't know what's going to happen if they've had problems, if people don't know what's going to happen in the future, they don't have plans and a strategy and objectives and goals. It certainly does breed that kind of anxiety. So uncertainty it's a basic human need to have certainty. We also need uncertainty because it makes life fun. You know, we need a bit of both for sure. And if I look at the psychology stuff I study, it's the 6 basic human needs, and certainty and uncertainty are 2 of them. But strangely enough, they're really important. So just as you said, financial anxiety is a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the questions I've got here for you is that, you know, financial anxiety is a big one, and financial fitness funds usually focused around financial well-being. So what can people do in this area to help themselves right now?
So I'll obviously talk about it from the psychology perspective because I can't give financial advice. I think the biggest thing for me is focusing on what you can control and not what you can't. There's a lot of things that are outside of our control at the moment, and it can be really, really anxiety inducing. And sometimes we have a tendency to really focus on those things and think, oh, you know, what's going to be the outcome of that? Or, you know, I don't understand what's going to happen. When actually you kind of miss the things that are around you that you do have an element of control over. So an example might be, you know, you might not be able to immediately control how much you earn, but you can control how much you spend and the way you spend it. And I think if you're able to then switch your mindset into problem solving mode and think, okay, this might be a problem for me, but what can I do to kind of get on top of it, or what things can I put in place to help myself? You're moving into that problem solving mindset, which is a far better place to be than worrying and feeling stressed about things that are just outside of our control. So that's the big thing for me. Self-care is also really important. We talk about self-care a lot, and really, you know, what self-care for one person might be different to another, but we all have kind of basic fundamental needs: sleep, nutrition, exercise. You know, those are the things that really keep us healthy and well. And often in kind of the modern day culture, people are dissatisfied with at least one of these areas. So try and prioritize self-care. And I think something there is around, you know, people can feel guilty for doing that, particularly if they've got lots of things on their plate, or, you know, there's big things that they're worrying about. You might feel like, you know, I can't take time away from that and I have to keep thinking about it. But it's really important because self-care makes you feel, you know, more in control, more relaxed. It's essential for stress management, and you'll become more productive and be able to think clearer. Lean on your support networks as well, really, really important. Money is quite an uncomfortable topic to talk about, but actually when you do open up with the right people, it can feel like a weight off. And they might also be able to give you some advice or give you some tools that or a different perspective on things, which can really help. And find out what support is available to you as well. You know, trying to go it alone can just perpetuate those feelings of anxiety. So, I mean, I could talk for ages about this, but those I think I'd say would be my top tips.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned the word control quite a lot in there, and I'm definitely an advocate of that from a financial well-being perspective. So Let's talk about that for a minute. What can people do right now I can talk about it from financial, I can chuck in a couple of bits along the way, but what can they do from your perspective to feel more in control?
So I think something we talk about quite a lot in psychology, which hopefully some of you have heard of, is a sense of our locus of control. So the perception that we have power and control helps us to feel happy. This is something that you said earlier. It's really critical to our sense of happiness and well-being. We have what's called a locus of control, and this is either internal or external. And you have to try and figure out where you are on that spectrum. If you have an internal locus of control, then you believe that you have a degree or influence over what you do and what happens to you. But if you have an external locus of control, then you're more likely to believe that everything that happens to you is guided by fate or external forces or the actions of others. So I didn't get that job because the hiring manager just didn't like me. So you have to recognize what you can and can't control. Often we have control even if we think we don't. There's some level of control that we can get, but also recognize the power of influence as well. So there's always going to be things that we can't control.
Sorry, how do people work out which way they think?
How can people work out? I think you've got to look at situations and think about your internal monologue when things like that happen. So, when you're in difficult situations or you're in a position where you don't like the outcome, are you taking accountability and recognizing that actually there's something that you could have done about that, or that there's an element of control that you have? Or are you sat there thinking, well, this is really unfair, I don't deserve this, it wasn't my fault, the world is against me? It's things like that which really give us indicators as to where that locus of control is.
Yeah, I just keep on thinking about it from a financial perspective, and I think what we can control is we control our focus. And we sort of hear a bit too much about this. I think people get fed up of listening to it, but focus on what you're grateful for. I'm an absolute believer in that. If you write them down and have them near to you, it's very difficult to feel down and depressed and anxious when you're grateful for what you have got. But I find it sometimes easier to actually focus on what I want as well. So look to the future, look forward. And if you can focus on what you want, I kind of find that, and I certainly manage my own stresses by doing this. I focus on what I want, and it means there's not enough room in my mind to focus on what I fear. And also, I noticed that people, we're sort of moving on to this in a minute, but I noticed that people kind of say things. It's like they say things like a belief. They make a statement, and that's it. That's the end of it. I can't do that because. And I find that I actually look beyond that, and I listen to them. I go, okay, and I challenge it, because sometimes it's just a story. It's just a story that people give themselves to protect themselves from what they really are frightened of. But if we let that stop us moving forward, then not a brilliant thing. So you mentioned mindset in there. I talk a lot about in financial wellbeing mindset, and I say that 80% of financial wellbeing is our mindset, the way we think about money. 20% of it's mechanics, and in my industry, it's full of great people. It's full of really well-meaning, very bright people, and they talk a lot about all the financial stuff, which is great, but sometimes we're telling the wrong people the wrong stuff at the wrong time, and they're doing it the wrong way. So I think we've got to get people to want to go and learn these things. So what can people do? I can talk about it from the financial side, obviously, but what can people do to improve their mindset?
I think it really is all rooted in our belief systems. So, we all hold beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about other people that are kind of deep rooted, and we hold them as absolute truths. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're based on experiences that we've had which can impact our worldview. So we talk about limiting beliefs. And you mentioned earlier about some people will say statements like, there's no way I'll get out of debt, or I can't possibly save because I'm not earning enough money. And, I think there's certain thought patterns which limit us, and which when we say them with absolute truths, they're kind of answering a question without even exploring whether it's possible that there might be another way of thinking about it. So the first thing for me is about identifying those limiting beliefs, looking for the evidence to basically disprove them. You may not be earning a lot of money, you may not be able to save, but you rather than just assuming that straight away, you've got to kind of really find the evidence for or against it. I also talk a lot about kind of a growth versus a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset is about kind of learning from mistakes and not letting failure define or stop you from future successes. So you may have had a really bad experience, or you might have got yourself into debt, but that doesn't define you, and that doesn't define your future. Someone who has a fixed mindset is more likely to give up or to view setbacks as a reflection of their own ability. You also mentioned about establishing the why, and I think that's also really important. You've got to have the right motivation for wanting to do something. We might all believe that we want to get rich because we see posts on social media, we see people living the big life, and we think that's what we want. But often, those kind of motivations, they're quite top level, and they're not really getting into what we actually want and why. So it's about trying to establish that motivation and understand what's important to me, because it might not actually be that far out of reach. And just because we know we should do something, it doesn't mean we will. So it's trying to understand how you can establish that need. And also it's about being aware of your internal state as well. So if you're really stressed, if you're anxious, frustrated, then maybe right now isn't the best time to be trying to think of ways to pay off your debts or trying to make a big financial plan. You've got to regulate your emotion. You've got to give yourself a clearer head. And so that sometimes means taking a step back and doing a bit of self-care and then coming back to it when you've got a clearer head. And it can also help to imagine that you're talking to a friend. So, what advice would you give to someone that was in your situation? Would you tell them that it's never going to get better and they're never going to get to where they want to do? Or what kind of advice would you give them? And I think sometimes we're a lot more rational when we're thinking about it from other people's perspectives than our own. You kind of have to remove that emotion from it sometimes. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say. Again, could talk about it for ages.
Well, the thing you mentioned there, which stuck out to me, was internal state. Now, I'm a big fan of this thing, because that internal state is something which you can change very quickly. A lot of people don't realise that I learned many years ago, and we can't always be 100% every day. I thought that, I mentioned you earlier this morning, I had a really bad night's sleep last night. I had 3 bad days, some chunky items, challenges to deal with. And I went to bed last night and I was playing in my mind, and I woke up every hour. And I woke up this morning, finally about 5, 6 o'clock, and I'm thinking, I've got to do Financial Fitness Fridays today. I'm feeling a bit rubbish, My state, my physical state wasn't brilliant. So, my way of dealing with that, to change your state, you can change your focus, what you focus your mind on. So having a responsibility to do this today, that certainly focuses my mind. I'll have to get sorted out, whatever happens. So I thought, what can I do? So I can change my physiology as well. And what I did today is I put some really good food in, some porridge and some berries, and I went for a run. I had an hour's run. I knocked out 6 miles earlier on. Well, I'm looking a bit hot and bothered now. But, now I'm ready for action. So we can manage that. But, when we're going to start making decisions, when we're going to start planning, when we're going to start taking control, that internal state is really important. So some of you said there, let's not make decisions like that when we're stressed out. Now, I sometimes find it quite embarrassing how stressed I was about something when I get out of it. And I look back and go, well, it wasn't a big deal, but you kind of get wrapped up in the whole thing, especially when you can't get a release like, lockdown. I'm missing the pubs, and I thought it was the booze. It's not. It's the crack. It's going out and having fun and laughing with people that I miss. So that release is really important. So look, how are we doing for time? Let's just check. Oh, we've got 5 minutes. That's great. Okay, look, thanks so much for that. I think our preparation for this, we were talking for about an hour. There was so much content. We'll probably have to get you back again, actually, Emily. It's been so good.
Look, I still owe you one anyway.
You do? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I'll take you up on that. I'd like to feed my brain as well as my body, so I tend to listen to a lot of audio books. But while we're talking about books, in order to help people to reduce anxiety and stresses, can you recommend any good books? What are you reading right now?
If you want to look at mindset, talking about the fixed and the growth, the queen of that is Carol Dweck. She's got a book called Mindset.
How do you spell that?
CarolDweck.
Okay.
I have read her book. I would probably say that watch her TED Talk first. It kind of summarizes everything that you need to know. But the book goes into a lot of detail and gives examples about kind of growth and fixed mindset in work, in relationships, with money, in business. So it's quite interesting. The other one that I read recently was How to Make Friends and Influence People. I really like
Carnegie.
Pardon?
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
That's such an old book, but it's so relevant.
Yeah, it's a really old book, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that kind of, we slightly touched on influence earlier, but it shows you kind of how you do have the power of influence in a lot, even if you might not be able to control certain things. I just finished Man's Search for Meaning as well by Viktor Frankl, which I think you said you've read as well.
My #1 book ever. Which
was really good. And I think that, I mean, you kind of talked about it, didn't you? About sort of...
There's lots of books been written by people who went through the Holocaust, who went through the, were locked up in Auschwitz and all that. This person, Viktor Frankl, went on to be a psychologist, did not write about it for sympathy, didn't write about it to tell everyone how horrible it was. There was enough out there about that. This was all about how he managed to control the ultimate thing. Everything was stripped away from him, but the one thing he could control was his own emotion. No matter how much they beat him and how much they starved him and worked his fingers to the bone and threatened him with death every day, he would not let them beat him from a psychological standpoint, and he owned it. So when you read that book, it puts every problem you've ever had into perspective. And because we spoke the other day, I actually downloaded the audiobook and had another go, because I'd read it for a few years, and it still brings a tear to my eye. But that was my #1 book I've ever read, Man's Search for Meaning. Brilliant, simply easy to read as well, short book.
Yeah, and I mean, coming from a psychology point of view, I really liked the second half. So he splits it into 2 halves. The bit about logotherapy, which is essentially helping people find meaning in things. And, I think it's really important, because meaning is so important for our well-being. And sometimes we can be in situations where we feel like everything's going wrong, that nothing is going to be great, or that we're going to be in this situation forever. And I think when you read something like that, it really puts things into perspective and helps you to realize that, you can find meaning from even the smallest of things. The other one that I've just ordered, I haven't read it yet, but it arrived yesterday, was Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, who is the king of positive psychology. He's the founding father, and it's about how you can shift your mindset to be far more optimistic, which, is really important in all of these situations. So, yeah.
Well, it's a nice place to reside. If you see, the glass is half full rather than half empty in most areas of your life, you're going to feel happier generally, aren't you? I mean, I've certainly kind of was born with that a wee bit, and some people criticise me for being over-optimistic. Some people say, you don't live in the real world, Well, if your world's a real world, I don't want to be in it, Look, thanks ever so much. We've come to the half an hour mark, so I just need to share screen. I just need to tell people about next week. I need to put the caveats up, and then we've got quite a few questions. So let's have a little look. So let me just share screen. And so those of you that got to go, good luck on your journey to financial wellbeing. I hope you really got something out of the session today with Emily Cooke from Thrive, not promoting her. Haven't got any shares in the company. But if people did want to actually find you, Emily, what's the website?
So I can post it in the chat. It's just thrive.uk.com. We have a mental health app, which we support organisations to share with their employees. But a lot of the work I do is delivering training and consultancy.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So, in the chat box you'll find that if anyone wants to have a look around, that's brilliant. So, just while you're here next week, obviously we've got the budget on next week on March the 3rd. So that's Wednesday. And so next Friday, we've got a lovely financial advisor, female financial advisor called Grace. She likes to call herself Grace the Ace. She is kind of crazy. I think she's quite a unique financial advisor. I think you're going to find her a lot of fun. The interesting thing is she's going to be talking about tax, and we wanted to find a way to make tax interesting. Well, if you can pay the minimum amount legally, then, you know, and morally, then that's not a bad place to be. So, and Grace is a lot of fun. So Grace is going to join us. And also we're going to be, we're going to have the budget on the Wednesday, and then we'll look at some of the output of the budget and bring that to Friday and try to share with you in plain English terms what that means to everybody. I don't think it's going to be too many shocks and bad news for people. I think it's going to be a giveaway type of budget, because at the moment people aren't ready to pay more taxes just yet, you know. So that's next week. Jump on that if you're about. I need to put the caveats up and then I can stop the share. So thanks very much, everybody. Those you've got to go, take care. Look forward to seeing you next week. Now I'm going to move on to the questions and answers. So let's have a look what we got. Okay, so there's quite a few personal ones here, which I don't think will be appropriate, but and there's also some here which are very much about, you know, the mechanics of financial stuff. So probably not for today. Somebody just asked, is there any sites or blogs that can help me with financial stress? Do you know of anything they can go to?
Oh, there are so many out there. There are so many out there. Look, it really, yeah, I think I
can share one actually while you're thinking.
Looking for.
One of the things you can do to reduce financial stress is to take control. Okay, and if you feel in control, then your stress will go down. And one of the ways to do that is to just know what's going on with your money. Sometimes when we're so stressed, we kind of avoid looking at it. We just try to avoid the pain of looking at the fact, but we've got to confront it. And I would always suggest people do some budgeting. And there is a budget planner on a website called the Money Advice Service. They don't try and sell you anything. They will signpost you to help. But if you go into it and just commit yourself to 10 minutes, have a go at it. The Money Advice Service is a budget planner. You put all your financial stuff in, okay? It's very easy to use. And what it will give you very quickly is a report showing you your spending. And what we need to do is know what's going on and then make some better decisions. Sometimes what happens is you see that you're spending too much in an area and it gives you a little emotional moment. You don't like it. And you go, right, I'm going to change. And that's sometimes a little switch we need to change our behavior. Okay, so I would highly recommend to really reduce financial stress. I don't think you're going to listen to a lot or read a lot that's going to change things. I think it's what you do. And I think taking control. Also, in that process, learning more. It depends what your anxiety is about. But if it's about retirement, go and learn about pensions. You know, if it's about debt, go and learn about debt. You know, so there is help. Also, a lot of you will be working at companies that will have an employee assistance program, and there's lots of that kind of help there. So have a look, see if your employer provides one. A lot of them do, and there's help there. So, did you think of anything else, Emily? That any other apps, podcasts, or whatever?
I mean, the Thrive app obviously has, look, we have lots of kind of mindfulness and relaxation techniques. I think there is lots out there. You know, the Mind website and the NHS, to be honest, are the two that I would recommend, because they are well known, they're regulated, you can trust the advice on there. And it really comes down to sort of managing some of those symptoms that you might be feeling, and it's about working out what works best for you in that situation. But I think Mind have a good section on financial well-being, so I would probably signpost people to there.
Brilliant. Okay, it's an interesting question here. We might as well touch on it a bit. It's not financial, but it is definitely about, you know, it does affect the way we feel, our stress levels and our anxiety. Someone's mentioned about they eat far too much sugar and lots of other things causing anxieties. They're asking for YouTube links you can offer for mindfulness. But I think, well, just on that particular subject, what should people avoid putting in their body to avoid being stressed?
That's how long is a piece of string? I think it's really difficult to answer that one. I think, to be honest, speaking to that question, you have to understand where it's coming from. Often, if we're using food as a way of dealing with uncomfortable feelings, if we find that we eat more sugary foods when we're stressed, or because we're really tired, we reach for those foods. It can be a bit of a perpetual cycle, which can then feed your kind of anxiety. And also, I think there's a big piece around self-esteem there as well. I don't think it's something we can really go into in a few minutes. No. But I think as well, it's important to just be really kind to yourself. Where is that anxiety coming from? One thing that can help, particularly with eating habits, is keeping a food journal. And making note of the foods that you eat, how you were feeling at the time. Were you eating them because you were hungry, or was there emotion involved in there? And it can help you to understand whether there are patterns. So it might be worth just having a look at kind of food journaling, really, and that can be good. There's also I think loads of podcasts around controlling your eating and not eating, like emotional eating, so it might be worth looking into that as well. But I think that the main point there is just understanding where it's coming from.
I think there's a lot of information about there. I mean, we all know about eat whole foods, avoid sugar, flour, processed stuff, and certain fats, So okay, look, we don't want to get too much into that because that's not our expertise, but you mentioned something to me when we were getting prepped for this about things that people can do you talked about a daily routine. Just talk a little bit about that, because I think that answers a few of the questions we've got here.
So what, sorry, can you, what?
You talked about, in order to try and change our stress levels, to take control, you talked about a daily routine. Yeah.
So routine is something that can help us to feel more in control, especially when there's a lot of things that we feel are outside of our control. We might think that there's, we can't control our job, we can't control how much we're earning, we can't control our finance. One thing you can control is your routine. And often when we talk about self-care, a lot of people say, well, I don't have time, I've got kids, I've got a job, I've got to be up doing this and that. But you do have an element of control over what time you get up in the morning, what time you go to bed, how you structure your day in some format. So I think it can really help to start by having that routine, and looking and planning your week ahead, really, and looking at where you're spending your time. Are there perhaps things that you're spending too much time on that are sapping your energy? And I think there it's about working out what gives you energy and trying to spend a bit more time in that area. But even just kind of getting up 15-20 minutes earlier than you usually do and protecting that time for yourself. You might go downstairs and make a coffee and just sit there and check in with yourself. Think about how you're feeling. What's your mindset like today? What do you want to achieve today? It could just be finishing your coffee and sitting down for work. You've got to celebrate the small things. But I think having that sense of routine can be really helpful, particularly if you're feeling like you are not in control of things.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, so I've got lots and lots of questions, but they are quite personal. I think it's probably unfair to put you on the spot, and also to do
there was one that I see which I'm happy to answer about. Okay. Supporting someone else who you feel isn't necessarily making the best financial decisions. So someone has said, hesitant to move in with my partner because he's not as financially savvy as I am and doesn't seem to make any effort to save. He's not in debt or anything. How can I positively help him find his motivation? So I can talk from personal experience here. I am not great with my money. I'll put it out there. My partner is. We've moved in together throughout the lockdown, and something that really helped me is that he has never ever once told me what I should do or made me feel bad about spending where I probably shouldn't be spending or not saving as much as I probably should be. He has kind of sat down and said, right, let's think about our goals. What do we want to achieve from life? Where do we want to see ourselves? And what do we need to do to get there? So I think the biggest thing there for me is try not to see it as laziness. he might just not understand, or he might not have that why. So how can you help him get there? And maybe there's something that you can think about as a couple. You know, what do you both want to achieve from life, and what do you need to get there? So I think the big thing is around not telling someone what they should or shouldn't do, but trying to encourage them to get there, by also involving yourself in that process as well. So hope that helped, but that's a personal experience from my point of view.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine that was married for about 20 years, and they eventually split up. And it was interesting because it had nothing to do with infidelity or anything like that. It was all to do with he was very, very organised and in control of the finances, and she was not at all. But what he did is he then looked at spreadsheets and bank statements and ended up questioning every single thing she did and just drove them apart. And I think sometimes you have to realise that a couple work well together because they fill each other's gaps. You know, we've got to appreciate that. I mean, my wife and I are completely different, but together, I think we're a better whole unit. So that's good. Thank you very much for that. I think then we are coming round to the end. So unless there's any more quick questions that come up that we can answer, I think what we'll do is, Emily, if there's a couple of questions on that you can answer privately to people, then take those away. I just want to thank everybody for jumping on, and thank big thanks to Emily. I know we did promote Thrive a little bit more than we normally do, but I feel good about that because it's a great thing it's at the end of that, it's making people happy, you know. So good luck to you. I will pick you up again and we'll do another one of these. Maybe we've got the winter series now, we've got the final one next week. We'll do the spring session. So maybe spring or summer, we'll get you back again. I think it'll be very popular. I'd be interested to see the feedback we got from today's session. I think it'll be really powerful. We've got some good books there to go and have a look at. I'd recommend Man's Search for Meaning. So I think I've done everything I need to do. Thanks ever so much, Emily. Thanks everyone for jumping on. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. And I wish you every success on your journey to financial well-being and well-being in general. Sun's shining, lockdown's got light at the end of the tunnel. I think the world is becoming a happier place. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
See you, Emily. Bye-bye.